Welcome back. And this will be part two because I didn't cover everything in the first one. So this will be part two of feeding horses. The other one actually ran a little longer than I would like it to have been. And I didn't cover a few things I want to get to today. So a few things. A couple of myths I want to talk about that are common mistakes people make when feeding horses. And I'm going to start off with one of the more common ones is, in North America, it's almost an epidemic of obese horses right now. And part of the reason for that is they're being overfed. Well, obviously that would be why. But why they're being overfed, it's usually because in the wintertime, people think they need to give the horses extra supplements and extra feed to keep them warm in the wintertime. And that's actually a myth. And what you feed your horse is even a bit of a myth, because a lot of people will supplement in the wintertime with grains and such. And horses actually, you can look this up yourself. I'm only mentioning these things because I'm pretty confident this information is accurate because I've read it enough times, is that horses can generate more heat with just hay than they can with grains. The other thing about that is their digestive system, their mouth, their chewing mechanism, their entire digestive system is not designed for grains. Now, you might say, hey, Max, you're feeding grain to your horse. Yes, we got some oats here. But I explained in the last video why. That entire thing there is going to be divided amongst 4 horses. That's all they get. And the only reason I'm even using that is I put it into this pail here, then I wet it down a little bit, and then I add the other stuff to it, and the moisture helps it stick, so I get a nice uniform mix, and it makes it a little more palatable, because I'm pretty sure that these other things, they probably wouldn't eat them if I didn't do that. If I tried to just give it straight to them, they probably wouldn't touch that stuff. The one in the other bucket there for the one horse, she'd probably eat that on its own, but this other stuff, no, probably not. So that's the only reason that I am giving grain of any kind. And anybody that's ever seen the waste product from a horse that's eaten a lot of grain, you will find out that these oats come out looking pretty much the same as they go in. They aren't designed for them. They can't chew them properly. And that leads to another thing that I want to talk about, is flax. Now, you've probably heard a lot about how good flax is, and it's true. The last few years, several years actually, there's been a lot of talk about the benefits of flaxseed, both in humans and in horses, and it's true. There's lots of good stuff on the inside of a flaxseed, all kinds of fatty acids, omega-3, and all this good stuff. Stuff that both you and your horse need. So it is beneficial, but there is not a digestive system in the world that can crack the hull of a flaxseed. The outer surface, the shell part of that seed, is so ridiculously hard. There is not a digestive system that can break through that to get the nutrients out of the inside, and that's where all the good stuff is on the inside. So unless it's ground flax, it is completely useless to you or your horse. And I've seen breads, bagels, all kinds of stuff like that for humans that have got flax seeds on the outside. Perhaps that's more for decorative purposes. I sure hope that's not what's in them, because if they don't grind the flax, it's completely useless, and your flax bread that you're buying is not doing you any good at all. It may as well be plain bread for quite a bit less. So flax must be ground. And here's another catch to flax. Even though it is an important element, it's good. It's got lots of good stuff in it, like I said, for both you and your horse. But if you grind it, you got to use it right away, because it doesn't keep. It goes rancid quite quickly. And even if they put preservatives into it, if you buy ground flax that has preservatives in it to keep it from going rancid, its nutritional value deteriorates quite rapidly. I've been told from somebody that sells the stuff, so that even the stuff with preservatives in it that are supposed to be still good, keeps it from going rancid. They actually told me don't buy the stuff. And this is somebody that sells it, told me don't buy it, Okay, so they weren't being biased. They had no ulterior agenda. Their only agenda was to make sure that I got good information. So that was another thing interesting about flax. So if you want to give ground flax to your horse, which, okay, I got nothing against that. It's probably good if your horse needs it. There's lots of good stuff in it. Go buy yourself a really, really cheap coffee grinder. I bought one recently for about $13. They're not real expensive if you get the cheap ones. And, grind your flax daily or every couple of days. Like I said, it does deteriorate quite quickly once it's ground. Doesn't last, so you don't want to be, you don't go out and buy a 50-pound bag of the stuff that's already ground. It'll be garbage before you get through the first pound of it. So it'd be a complete waste. I didn't learn that until many years later. I actually did buy a 50-pound bag of ground flax one time because I knew it had to be ground, but I didn't realize how quickly it deteriorated and went rancid, etc. Anyhow, okay, so flax has to be ground. Whole flax, useless. The horse or you will get zero, absolutely zero out of that flaxseed. And there's lots of good stuff in there. So flax must be ground. Grains, no, they don't need grains. They will stay warmer with an ample supply of hay. Make sure they're well fed with that. And, all this stuff here, this is not additional feeds. These are just minerals and such that I'm giving them to make sure that they got the stuff, the electrolytes and whatnot that they need. I'm not providing them with extra nutrients to keep them warm. Some people do, a lot of people do, in fact, and it's unfortunate because overfeeding during the wintertime, here's another problem that happens. Aside from the fact overfeeding can result in an obese horse. Overfeeding during the wintertime means that when the spring grass comes out, they can't handle it. And then you end up with laminitis in the spring. Common problem. You always hear about it. Watch out for spring grass. Well, if you don't overfeed them in the wintertime, you don't even have to worry about that because, if they actually lose a little bit of weight over the winter, that's okay. That's not going to hurt them one little bit. And if they get into some of that spring grass, their body is going to be capable of absorbing it and using it, and they're not going to end up getting sick from it. So that's another reason not to feed grains. Another feed that I would talk about a little bit here is alfalfa. Now, lots of people feed horses alfalfa. That's not uncommon. But you have to be extremely careful with the stuff. I've seen people actually give their horses pure alfalfa in the wintertime. That's not a good idea at all. I don't recommend that ever. But they did okay. Their horses didn't have any problems, surprisingly. But I wouldn't recommend it. In fact, I don't recommend it at all. Because the thing about alfalfa is, it was never, ever intended as a horse feed. It was something that people, an idea that someone got. Okay, I'll back up a little. It was originally cultivated as cattle feed. And to fatten up cattle in a hurry, the richer the feed, the better. That's okay for cattle. They generally have a fairly short lifespan anyhow before they're slaughtered for meat or something like that. Not a big deal for them. But for horses, it was never really intended. It was actually people in the race industry that wanted high-energy foods for their horses for racing, started feeding them alfalfa. Next thing you know, everybody else thought, hey, if they can feed alfalfa, so can I. Now you all of a sudden got a lot of people feeding alfalfa to horses, and there's a very old saying I come across years ago, hot food equals hot-tude, and hot attitude. And hot feeds can actually affect behavior. I didn't believe that until I saw it with my own horses. I'd heard the saying. I didn't buy it. I thought, hey, it's just, somebody made it up, another one of those old wives' tales. But in fact, they actually got into some wheat one day by accident. Long story how that happened. And one of them, there was definitely a very obvious behavioral change in that horse. She was just wound right up like a kid on, a sugar rush. Well, actually, that's a myth too, but never mind. It definitely did affect the behavior. So if you're having behavioral issues with your horse and cases of weight gain or laminitis, I also have one right now. All she's got to do is look at alfalfa and she'll get laminitis from that. That's another risk you got to worry about. It's a little too rich for most horses. Some Some will do okay on it, but another one I would not recommend. So we kind of covered that too. They don't need, and when it comes to keeping them warm in the wintertime, up here, well, can't see again, crappy window, but it's not, minus 30 is not unusual in the wintertime here. And of the 50 horses here, I think there's only half a dozen that are even blanketed. And we don't have any problem keeping warm. That's another thing you can read up on. You will find lots and lots of articles that will tell you that horses have far less trouble staying warm than they do staying cold. A hot day is far harder on a horse than the cold weather. It'll be far too cold for you before it's ever too cold for the horse. In fact, I don't think it can be too cold for the horse. There's actually, I'm trying to remember where it is. I think it was in Siberia or someplace like that. There's actually people that raise horses in temperatures that are far more extreme than they are here. And they don't blanket any of them. None of them are blanketed. The horses can handle the cold. They don't need the extra grains. Their digestive system isn't designed for grains. And if they actually do happen to lose a little weight over the winter, not a big deal, okay? So don't need grains, don't need to be overfed in the wintertime. Flax got to be ground. Alfalfa, but better be pretty darn careful with that stuff. So I think that wraps up part 2. If I think of something else, I'll talk about it later, but those are a couple other items I wanted to talk about that I thought were important. And I'm, like I said, I'm not a nutritionist. That's not my area of expertise, so I'm not going to claim that. But those are things that I've read enough about enough times that I'm pretty convinced that that's true. So I'm going to share that information with you because all of those things are issues that I have personally seen where, people still think giving whole flax to the horse is fine. No, it's not. They get nothing out of it that way. You're wasting your money buying the stuff if it's not ground. It doesn't keep well, so it has to be ground as you need it. Buy yourself a cheap coffee grinder for that, because you actually don't need very much. You only need a couple tablespoons of the stuff anyhow, so you can easily grind that up on a daily basis. Grains, no, they're not designed for it, and they don't actually help the horse stay warm in the winter. And if they do get anything from it, all you're going to end up with is a fat horse. It's not going to be warmer because of it. They actually will stay warmer because of the hay. And alfalfa, yes, it is a rich food, and it can cause behavioral issues in your horse, along with a lot of other supplements like sweet feeds and stuff like that. You got to really be careful with some of that stuff because it can actually change the behavior of your horse. So feeding horses part 2 there, that would kind of wrap that up. Hope that helps you a little bit. Have a good day. Bye.